Kyle, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you kindly. Pleasure to be here.
I love a passage that I found while researching your book, Legends Don't Retire and Neither Should You. While wealth can certainly magnify your influence, it is not the essence of your legacy, but more of an amplifier. Your legacy is the sum of your life, of the life you have lived, and the impact you make on your community and the people around you. Many people talk about leaving a legacy. I prefer to focus on living one. That sounds like something that it's got to come from the school of life. Is there a particular event or particular events in your life that brought you to this point of view?
Certainly. I appreciate the question. So I stand on the shoulders of giants. I look to my grandfather. He was a sergeant World War II, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Look to my father, who served in Vietnam, served in the pulpit 30 years, and served in just about every capacity you can imagine in booster clubs and summer camps and soccer refereeing, certainly his local church. And my father, in particular, had a profound impact on my life. And after developing Parkinson's in his mid 60s, and then passing just a few short years later in his early 70s, there was a question amongst myself and my siblings as to who would really remember, who would still come back. It'd been a long time since he'd been in the pulpit. It'd been a long time since he could build a relationship. He hadn't talked for the past 9 months, and so who would still remember? And furthermore, it was raining that morning. And I think we can all relate to any obligations that we might have of a social nature. And if it's raining, we reconsider. We could send them a card. We could send them some flowers later. We'll call them next week. They'll totally understand. But it was standing room only. There were 300 people in the auditorium. They came from 6 states. They canceled vacations. And the ceremony lasted over 3 hours as person after person shared stories about impact that my father had made 20, 25 plus years ago on their lives. And that was the day I learned what legacy meant.
Wow, that is a beautiful story. You come from a family of military service. I come
Mhm.
from a family of military service as well. That is fantastic. I also come from a family, if you go way enough back in some corners, they're actually pastoral roots there as well. I'm not
Okay,
as familiar with those, but I can identify with a lot
sure.
of what you're saying there. So with that being said, first of all, I'm curious as to how that figures into the title of the book,
Hmm.
Legends Don't Retire and Neither Should You. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Happy to. So, first, I'll just say broadly that I feel we've done a disservice in our society in the way that we've elevated this notion of retirement as something that everyone should aspire towards. That you should stick your nose to the grindstone, that you should pound it out for 30 or 40 years, that you should pile up a theoretical pool of dollars and then kick your feet up and do nothing, fish all day or golf all day or what have you. And those that have tried that typically find it to be pretty hollow. As I observed it in my father's life, he was always busy. He was always active. He was always investing in his community. My grandfather was the same way, always pouring into other people. And so it's okay to retire from something, but it's crucial that you retire to something. And so continuing to remain engaged and involved and pursuing opportunities to give back is crucial for a truly fulfilling life.
Yeah, and as I reflect back on what you were saying about your father, developed a disease in his
Mhm.
60s and passed away in the 70s. If you look at, again, that kind of conventional life that we lay out, a person maybe works their into their 60s
Yes,
and then they get to the retirement. So many
right.
times, I mean, people are 60, 65, and those meaningful things that you're talking about, it's like, okay, once I retire, I'm going to get to those things.
Exactly. I'll finally
And
have the
yeah,
time to do it. Yeah.
yeah. And as a matter of fact, I had a neighbor. My wife and I have lived in this neighborhood for over well over 20 years. We
Okay.
moved here. First few years, we had a next door neighbor. My wife would get into over the fence conversations with the wife. They were pretty good friends, and the lady was looking forward to retirement. And it's like, oh, once as soon as I retire, I'm going to retire in 6 months, and we're going to travel and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a couple of months later,
Hmm.
ambulance shows up in front of the house.
Sure.
Um, she was recovering from a routine procedure and had some
Mm.
complications, and that was that.
Wow.
So all of those dreams deferred.
Yes.
It's really had an impact on me all these years. So I can certainly see that. So on the one hand, I can certainly identify with what you're talking about, but you are, among other things, a financial professional.
Sure.
So how do you balance? Because
Mm.
again, everything that you're talking about here is really kind of the pitch of a lot of financial advisors. I'm at an age right now where I'm having those conversations about my
Right.
retirement. And there's almost this thing they do where it's kind of building vision. It's like, what do you want to do when you retire? Where do you want to go? Do you want to take trips? Do you want to,
Yeah.
all of this? And it seems like the conventional financial world, part of it is almost promoting,
Sure.
well, maybe supporting is a better way
Yeah.
of putting it. But it seems like conventional financial planning is very tightly tied to that conventional model,
Right.
not so much because they're, you know, selling it. Maybe it's just because it's the conventional thing and that's the way they identify with their clients. But either
Sure.
way, that's typically the approach. How do
Hmm.
you integrate your personal beliefs with being in the financial advisement business? I assume that you work with clients who maybe are planning on retiring, or
Sure.
maybe even younger people who
Hmm.
are, trying to plan out that 20-year retirement. How
Right.
do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it in a sense it goes back to a phrase I mentioned earlier, which is it's okay to retire from something as long as you retire to something. I When I say legends don't retire and neither should you, I'm not recommending you die at your desk. What I am suggesting is that the traditional framework of deferring your life, deferring your opportunities to make an impact with others and to create memories, as we've talked about earlier, is unwise because we aren't promised tomorrow. And additionally, you run a very real risk that if you, quote, leave a legacy, then as you're walking out that proverbial door and you toss it over your shoulder, you're hoping that next generation catches it. You're hoping they know what to do with it. And if instead you pivot from leaving a legacy to living one, then it becomes a much more active thing that you get involved in with now rather than, quote, someday. And you start mentoring and you start facilitating and you start actually making a difference in the lives and in the causes that you care the most about. And so it's really about integrating your passion into your life in alignment with your finances rather than compartmentalizing all of it and say, well, first I've got to grind it out for decades and pile up a bunch of money. And then I can think about the impact I want to make on the world. And instead, looking at integrating that all throughout your life.
So it's really about not running to any extreme. So
Mhm.
it's not putting all your chips on the I'm going to defer any type of happiness or meaning until after I retire. But at
Sure.
the same time, we're not running to the other side of the boat. And I don't think anybody uses the word YOLO anymore, but I'm going to use it anyway.
Right.
The other side of the boat is YOLO. You only live
Right.
once.
Right.
So the truth, like with a a lot of things, kind of lies in the middle, which
Sure.
is interesting because I always find it interesting how many younger people
Hmm.
are really wrapped around the axle about this retirement thing.
Oh,
And of
yeah.
course, they should be to a certain extent because now more than ever from a financial perspective, and that's what we talk about on this podcast, you have to take care of that part of your life.
Sure.
And you have to prepare because nobody's going to prepare for you. But at the same time, I do kind of worry sometimes that a person who's in their 40s and their 30s, needs to think about this,
Right.
but it doesn't need to be this all-consuming thought and the thing
Absolutely.
that you worry about every second. So the fact that you're suggesting a balance there
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. Are there particular clients maybe that you've had that you've had maybe a more difficult time suggesting that to?
Sure. So I would say I've actually encountered it on both extremes. So one particular client comes to mind who had done an excellent job of saving, was in his early 60s, had found the love of his life, second marriage for both of them, and was convinced that he needed to continue working because it would give him peace of mind to save more. And it took me about a year and a half of constantly nagging at him, constantly sharing data and reassuring him he was going to be okay, that he was finally willing to retire. So I had to talk him into retiring from his vocation. And you'd go, "Well, now, Kyle, I'm really confused because I thought you were the anti retirement advisor. I thought the book said it's not a good idea to retire." Again, let me be clear, it's okay to retire from something as long as you retire to something. And what I kept impressing upon him was, look, you've done a good enough job. You've saved enough money. It's time to shift that pendulum and start living. You have this new bride in your life, both in their 60s, but new to him, new relationship that you're cultivating. Create memories now while you can. And it took a while, but I eventually convinced him to do so. And it's a blessing, but it's bittersweet. They began traveling, and it wasn't 3 years before she developed macular degeneration and began to lose her sight. And so the window of what they thought was going to be available for them for travel quickly dwindled because of health issues.
Okay. All right. You said you've had both extremes. Could you show
Absolutely.
us a little bit about maybe an example of the other extreme?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So on the other side of the equation, you've got folks that simply are so consumed with what's going on immediately that they have difficulty even wrapping their minds around delayed gratification. And so there's certainly tremendous value in learning about compound interest, learning about the Stanford experiment of if you've got two marshmallows versus one marshmallow, and if you leave this marshmallow alone, you can have a second one, and just learning the benefits of delayed gratification, which quite frankly extend throughout our lives. If I'm willing to consume water instead of consuming monster energy drinks all day, it has long-term benefits. And so helping people understand that compounding effect that it has on your life and the importance of making sound decisions early and implementing discipline is just as crucial as recognizing at some point you need to hang it up and stop continuing to just work indefinitely.
So, how much of this is, if you look at people at those two extremes, how much of this is getting people to grasp or appreciate the fact that, and I think maybe we talked about this a little earlier, that this is an and situation and not an
Mhm.
or situation? Because particularly on that side of, and I've had this conversations with people, I've had this conversations with one side of a couple where this is the conflict. You
Right.
have one spouse who is really about planning for the future, and you have the other
Mhm.
spouse that's in the you only live once
Right.
mode. And I've even found a lot of times that life situations can drive that for people.
Sure.
Things like maybe having a sudden loss in their family. And it's like, well, I'm not
Mhm.
going to let that happen to me. I'm going to live my life. So
Right.
it seems like it is kind of balancing that out and getting an appreciation that you can achieve both of these things at the same time.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is we advocate building a life you never want to retire from. So I think there's another aspect there, which is that in this unfortunate dichotomy that people tend to fall into. They'll also end up making compromises with their health or compromises with their sanity, compromises in terms of relationships and opportunities to go to kids sports and other significant events because they're so determined that they've got to put in the work and they've got to build up that war chest to enable this opportunity to effectively do nothing for decades. And if instead you think in terms of what's sustainable, what could I continue doing indefinitely if my health permitted me to? And building a life that integrates certainly sound discipline financially and long term thinking, but also enables you to be engaged and involved in making memories and developing relationships. Then you may find that even when the day rolls around that it's time to hit that magic button, maybe you dial it back and decide that you want to start consulting in your field. Maybe you decide that what you want to do is still work, but you just don't have to draw a paycheck anymore. And so you shift and start investing time and energy into some nearby nonprofit that hopefully you had already gotten involved with for the past 10 or 15 years because you were living a legacy and not just leaving one. And so it allows you to integrate that all throughout your life.
And it seems like that would involve some examination of your
Oh, yeah.
life and also being deliberate. And
Mm,
being deliberate is not waiting necessarily until you're 60 to be deliberate, because
right.
if you're going to ultimately retire, quote unquote, to work with that nonprofit that you've been working with for 15 years, even if we're talking about
Hmm.
conventional retirement age, that means you've been working for that nonprofit since you were in your
Yes.
40s
Correct.
at least.
Yep.
So this seems like this is something, and actually 40s, I would have to say, if you haven't gotten really serious about thinking about retirement, whatever that might look like for you, a lot of
Sure.
times that's kind of when the bell rings in your head anyway. So it sounds like it's a process of, as you start thinking about this subject, thinking about it more holistically. It's
Yes.
not only, oh crap, I haven't been putting enough in my 401k. It's
Right.
also, what is my life going to look like at that point?
Absolutely.
And having that planning, doing that planning right along with the conventional financial planning.
Right.
And I imagine that could look different for different people, because there are people who just love what they do.
Oh, for
um,
sure.
Statistically, not as many as I think any of us would
Yeah,
like, but there are people who just don't ever want to stop doing what they're doing. And if
sure.
you're one of those lucky, relatively few, if you're
Right.
in that lucky minority, maybe the answer is just to keep doing what you're doing, maybe ratcheting back on that a bit so you
Mhm.
can balance that with travel or whatever it is that
Right.
otherwise you would delay. It's a very personal formula that a person has to find. And I'm so glad that you've written a book that walks people through that process. And it sounds like does the book walk people through that parallel process? Does it walk them through the practical financial steps that you need to make right along with these other steps we've talked about?
It absolutely does. It talks about the importance of compound interest. It talks about even just budgeting and cash flow management, right? You've got there's some basics, some fundamentals that you've got to master before you can start doing any fancy tricks. You've got to make sure you understand the fundamentals. And then it builds all the way into more of those, classic legacy thought processes. It talks about the importance of building a team of advisors around you so that you're getting insight and perspectives that's integrated across tax and legal and accounting and finance, and so pulling all of those pieces together in alignment towards a purpose driven set of goals is ultimately what allows you to build that life that you'd never want to retire from.
Yeah, because based on the title, there might be a temptation for a person to look at a book called Legends Don't Retire, and neither should you. It's like, Oh, I'm going to get that from my dad. He's in his 60s or late
Mhm.
50s or something. And that could be useful for dad, but it could be useful for that 40-year-old or that even that 30 something who
Yes,
is just starting their planning because
absolutely.
this is a long term plan that we're putting together here.
You're exactly right. So there's actually a chapter in the book that talks about the decades and how social scientists have identified that we are wired differently in terms of what our focus is, in terms of what our concerns are, in terms of just how we're wired. And the appetite for risk that you have, and the kinds of things that you're trying to sort out as an individual or as a family in your 20s is very different from the sort of things that you're processing and dealing with in your 50s. And this scales all the way up into the 90s. And then there's another section of the book that is geared towards folks that may be concerned that perhaps it's too late for them. And so it goes through a litany of examples of people that made profound impacts on the world in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and later.
I love it. So it's a read for people who, regardless of where you are along that
That's right.
timeline,
That's
there's
exactly
something
right.
that you can pick up from that. That's great. So, Kyle, really appreciate your time today.
You
I
bet.
would be on a financial podcast that really we really gear ourselves towards those who are trying to build first generation wealth.
Love that.
So that there's a lot of education that goes on there.
Sure.
We've talked about um, legacy from the angle we usually don't talk about it from, and thank you for that. But I
You
would
bet.
be remiss to have a professional on and not just ask them kind of a ticky money question.
Fire away.
So, and naturally, I'm gonna kind
What
of
do I
give you
think of
a point.
Bitcoin? Is that where we're going?
Oh no, 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 no. Oh no, 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 no. Wrong podcast. Wrong podcast. But you did mention that also in the book you do talk about some practical things,
Absolutely.
budgeting strategies, et cetera, et
For
cetera.
sure.
If you just had one tip in that area to leave a listener who has heard this conversation, they're grasping this conversation, they want to learn more, they want to take a holistic view at building their plan, the plan for the rest of their lives. But at the same
Mm,
time, maybe they're struggling with the financial part a little bit. If there's one just practical tip you could give them, let's narrow it down. Let's say in the area of budgeting.
okay.
What's a quick tip?
Sure. So, quick tip on budgeting would be that if it hasn't worked for you in the past, it's possible that it was a lack of discipline, but it's likely that you need a different strategy. So, in the book, I outline multiple strategies, and depending upon how your income comes in, depending upon what aspects you're trying to tackle, whether it's debt or whether it's how to properly handle variable income like bonuses and commissions that come in, depending on your specific situation, a different strategy might be the solution. So rather than just beating yourself up and saying, I guess I'm just terrible at this, it may be worthwhile seeing if there's a different approach where you can finally get a budgeting implementation that's going to work for you in your situation.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking about doing a series on that, and you've given me inspiration to push through on that because, yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways of approaching budgeting, and people have this conception in their head, and it's a negative conception. And a lot of
Right.
times, that negative conception is based on this very strict way of you have to budget this way.
Sure.
There are a lot of different ways of approaching it. I'm going to pick up the book
For sure.
and bone up on those, and then I'll rip them off for a series on this podcast later.
I
Just
love it. I love it. If I and then if I could leave folks with one last thing, it would be that people in my profession often like to preach diversification, and for sure it has merit. But what is often overlooked is that diversification has a specific purpose, which is to protect what you've built. And whether you're diversifying through real estate or through stocks and bonds or through utilizing multiple alternative investment vehicles, diversification is all about defense. and it's got its place, but no one gets wealthy through diversification. Wealth is built through concentration. You could concentrate by writing a hit song. You could concentrate by creating the next Netflix. You could concentrate by building a business in your garage and growing it. You could concentrate by becoming the best in your profession and becoming excellent at it. Wealth is built through concentration, it's protected through diversification.
I love it. I love it. One more time, the book is Legends Don't. Wow, screw that up. Legends Don't Retire, and neither should you. We'll provide a link to the show notes. We'll actually provide a link to your headquarters, your online headquarters.
KyleGabhart.com.
All right. So one other thing I did notice in reading up that you have a book that is, as we record, is it releasing soon or has it been released? Your new
It
book.
is, yeah. So it is in pre-release right now. You can order it on wherever books are sold. It's available. It's shipping out in August. It's called The Canteen, and it's about the month that I spent in Africa when I was 19 as a missionary, backpacking into remote villages.
Okay. Yeah, and I wanted to mention that because we've talked about legacy. We've talked
Sure.
about doing those things that fulfill you, and we didn't talk much about the book, but I kind of get the feeling as you look back on your life, if that situation was significant enough for you to write a book about, that experience may be a part of your legacy, and the book may
Oh,
be a
no,
part of
no
your
doubt about
legacy.
it.
Yeah,
Legends
yeah.
Don't Retire, as meaningful as it is and as impactful as it's been, was a couple of years of thought and effort and a couple of months of really concerted focus building it out. But the canteen has been percolating in my soul for 26 years.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Again, something to pick up to kind of stimulate the real thoughts of legacy that we've talked about here today. So, Kyle, again, appreciate your time. Love the book, love the work that you've been doing. Love the fact that you're challenging people to have a more balanced view of this crazy thing that we talk about incessantly on this podcast called retirement. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.